The wine glass slipped from my father's hand and shattered against the marble floor. The entire restaurant fell silent. Every eye in that elegant dining room was on us now. The successful businessman, his perfect family, and me, his daughter. The disappointment. "You're a disgrace to this family, Aurora," he had just said, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. 28 years old, playing soldier in some desk job while your sister builds an empire. But then something happened that changed everything. A man in a Navy uniform, stars gleaming on his shoulders, stood up from across the restaurant. An admiral. His voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Excuse me, sir. Are you talking about Lieutenant Commander Aurora Reeves?" My father's face went white. The admiral was walking toward us now, and I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs. "Because if you are," the admiral continued, his voice growing stronger with each step, "then you're talking about the woman who saved my life and the lives of 47 other men. Let me take you back to how this nightmare started. It was supposed to be a celebration dinner. My sister Celeste had just closed another multi-million-dollar real estate deal, and my parents wanted to commemorate it at Meridian, the kind of restaurant where a single appetizer costs more than most people's rent. I should have known better than to come. Sitting at that pristine white tablecloth, I felt like an imposter in my simple black dress. My sister sparkled in designer everything, her engagement ring catching the candlelight as she gestured animatedly about her latest conquest in Manhattan real estate. My mother hung on every word, her eyes bright with pride. And then there was me. "So, Aurora," my mother said, turning to me with that practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes, "how are things at— where is it you work again?" "Naval Air Station Norfolk," I replied quietly. "I'm a flight operations officer." My father didn't even look up from his steak. "Still playing around with those little planes, I see." Those little planes. If only he knew. "It's not playing, Dad. I coordinate combat missions, manage airspace, ensure pilot safety." "Safety," he scoffed, finally meeting my eyes. "Your grandfather built Reeves Industries from nothing. Your sister is expanding our legacy into new markets. And you're babysitting pilots." The words hit like physical blows. Celeste shifted uncomfortably in her seat, but said nothing. She never did. "Richard," my mother whispered. "Not here." But my father was just getting started. The wine had loosened his tongue, and years of disappointment came pouring out like water through a broken dam. "Do you know what people say when they hear my daughter is in the military? They assume I failed as a father, that I couldn't provide for my family, that my daughter had to run away and play dress-up because she couldn't handle the real world." Each word was a knife, precisely aimed and expertly delivered. Other diners were starting to stare, but my father didn't care. His voice grew louder. "Your sister generates more revenue in a month than you'll see in your entire military career. She's building something, creating value. And you're wasting your education, your potential, I'm serving my country," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He laughed. Actually laughed. "Serving your country. Aurora, you push papers and answer phones. You're a secretary with a fancy uniform." The humiliation burned through me like acid. Around us, I could feel the weight of stares, the whispered conversations, the judgment. This was my family, my own father, destroying me in public. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing it is?" he continued, his voice growing even louder. "When business associates ask about my children, I talk about Celeste's achievements, her success, her engagement to the senator's son. And when they ask about my other daughter, what do I say? That she's playing military in Virginia?" Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not in front of these people. You had every opportunity," he went on relentlessly. "Harvard MBA waiting for you, a position at the company, a real career. Instead, you chose to throw it all away for what? For a job that any high school graduate could do? Richard, please," my mother pleaded, but her voice was weak, uncertain. "No, Margaret. Someone needs to say this. Aurora needs to hear the truth. She's 28 years old, wasting her life, embarrassing this family with her childish fantasies of being some kind of hero." That's when he said it. The words that would echo in my mind for the rest of my life. "You're a disgrace to this family, Aurora. An absolute disgrace." The wine glass fell from his hand as he spoke, red wine spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. The crystal exploded against the marble, and suddenly the entire restaurant was watching our family drama unfold. I wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor and never exist again. The shame was suffocating, wrapping around my throat like a noose. 28 years of trying to earn his approval, and this was how it ended. Public humiliation, complete rejection. But then I heard chair legs scraping against marble. Admiral James Harrison was not a man who commanded attention. He commanded respect. As he stood up from his table across the restaurant, his presence filled the room like electricity before a storm. His wife remained seated, her hand over her heart, watching with wide eyes. "Excuse me, sir," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Are you talking about Lieutenant Commander Aurora Reeves?" My father's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He looked at the stars on the Admiral's shoulders, then at me, then back at the Admiral. Yes, she's my daughter, but then you're talking about the woman who saved my life," Admiral Harrison said, walking slowly toward our table. Every step was measured, deliberate, and the lives of 47 other men. The restaurant had gone completely silent. Waiters stopped mid-service. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the soft classical music seemed to fade into the background. I felt my world tilting on its axis. "There must be some mistake," my father stammered. "Aurora works in flight operations. She's not." Admiral Harrison reached our table and looked directly at me. His eyes were kind but intense, the eyes of someone who had seen things most people couldn't imagine. "Lieutenant Commander Reeves," he said formally. "May I?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. He turned to address my family, but his voice carried far enough for the entire restaurant to hear. "3 months ago, your daughter was the senior flight operations officer on duty during what we now call the Norfolk incident. Are you familiar with it, sir?" My father shook his head slowly. "Of course not," Admiral Harrison continued. "It was classified until last week, but I think it's time people knew what kind of person your daughter really is." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. The Norfolk incident, the thing that still woke me up in cold sweats, the thing I couldn't talk about, couldn't process, couldn't escape. On March 15th, at 3:47 in the morning, we lost contact with a squadron of 6 fighter jets during a routine training mission, 40 miles off the coast, instruments failing, storm moving in fast. I could see it all again. The radar screens going dark, the radio silence, the growing certainty that we were about to lose 6 pilots to the Atlantic Ocean. Standard protocol, Admiral Harrison continued, would have been to wait for dawn, send out search and rescue during daylight hours. The storm was too dangerous for night operations. Winds gusting to 70 knots, visibility near zero, waves 20 feet high. That's what the book says. That's what any reasonable person would have done. My sister was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. "But your daughter doesn't follow the book when lives are at stake. She coordinated a night rescue operation in conditions that should have been impossible. She redirected 3 Coast Guard cutters, launched 2 search helicopters, and personally managed air traffic control for the entire eastern seaboard while doing it." The Admiral's voice grew quieter, more personal. "I was in the lead aircraft, sir. We'd been flying blind for 20 minutes when we saw the lights. Your daughter had turned Norfolk into a beacon, guiding us home through the storm, but that wasn't enough for her." He paused, looking at me again. "When my plane developed hydraulic failure on approach, when my landing gear wouldn't deploy, Lieutenant Commander Reeves took control of that radio herself. She talked me through the manual override procedures while coordinating emergency response on the runway. She kept me calm, kept me focused, while my aircraft was literally falling apart beneath me. The silence in the restaurant was deafening. I landed that plane on fumes and prayers, sir, but mostly on the strength of your daughter's voice telling me I could do it. All 6 aircraft made it home that night. All 6 pilots walked away alive." My father looked like he'd been struck by lightning. "But the real heroism," Admiral Harrison continued, "came later. During the investigation, we discovered that your daughter had violated 17 different protocols to save our lives. She could have been court-martialed. Her career could have ended in disgrace. Instead, she volunteered to take full responsibility. She was prepared to sacrifice everything to protect the lives of the air traffic controllers and Coast Guard personnel who helped her that night." My mother's hand was over her mouth now, tears streaming down her cheeks. "That's the kind of person your daughter is, sir. She doesn't just serve her country. She embodies everything that service means. Honor, courage, sacrifice, the willingness to risk everything for others, even when those others are strangers. Admiral Harrison turned to me one final time. Lieutenant Commander Reeves, I never got the chance to thank you properly. The Navy's highest civilian honor will be presented to you next month, but I wanted to thank you personally, from one sailor to another, from one human being to another. He saluted me, right there in that fancy restaurant. A 3-star admiral saluted me while my family watched in stunned silence. The honor is mine, sir, I managed to say, standing to return his salute. When Admiral Harrison walked back to his table, the entire restaurant erupted in applause, but I barely heard it. I was watching my father's face, seeing 28 years of assumptions crumble in real time. The applause died down, but the silence at our table stretched on like an eternity. My father sat frozen, staring at his hands. My mother was still crying softly into her napkin. Celeste looked at me like I was a stranger. "Aurora," my father finally whispered, "why didn't you tell us?" How could I explain? How could I tell them about the nightmares? The weight of knowing that one wrong decision could have killed 6 people? How could I describe the loneliness of carrying classified secrets, of being unable to share the most important moments of your life with the people you love most? It was classified, I said simply. I couldn't. But we're your family, my mother said, her voice breaking. We should have known. We should have... What? Supported me? The words came out harder than I intended. When have you ever supported my choices? When have you ever asked about my work beyond whether it was suitable for the family image? My father flinched like I'd slapped him. You wanted to know what I do every day? I continued, months of suppressed emotion finally breaking free. I hold people's lives in my hands. Pilots trust me to guide them home safely. I coordinate search and rescue operations. I make split-second decisions that can mean the difference between life and death. I stood up, my legs shaky but my voice growing stronger. Every morning, I wake up knowing that someone's son or daughter might not come home if I make a mistake. Every day I carry the weight of other people's lives on my shoulders. And yes, sometimes I violate protocols. Sometimes I risk my career. Because that's what service means, putting others before yourself, even when no one will ever know what you sacrificed. The restaurant was listening again, but I didn't care anymore. You called me a disgrace, I said to my father, but I've never been more proud of who I am than I was the night I helped save those pilots. That's the real me, Dad. Not your disappointment. Not your failed daughter. A woman who serves her country with honor. I placed my napkin on the table and picked up my purse. Aurora, wait, Celeste said, speaking for the first time since the Admiral's revelation. Please don't go. I looked at my sister, beautiful, successful Celeste, who had always been everything I wasn't. Why? I asked. So you can pretend this conversation never happened? So we can go back to family dinners where Dad wishes I was more like you? No, she said, tears in her eyes. So I can tell you that I've always wished I was more like you. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? You think I don't know what people say about me? That I'm just Daddy's princess, riding on family money and connections? You think I don't see how you look at me, like I've never worked for anything in my life? Celeste was crying now, her perfect makeup running down her cheeks. I've spent my entire life trying to live up to an image, Aurora. Trying to be the perfect daughter, the perfect businesswoman, the perfect fiancée. But you followed your heart. You chose a path that meant something, even when it disappointed everyone, even when it cost you everything. She stood up and walked around the table to face me. I sell houses, Aurora. Expensive houses to rich people who already have too much. But you save lives. You serve something bigger than yourself. You're everything I always wanted to be but was too scared to try. The fight went out of me all at once. 28 years of sibling rivalry, of feeling like the family failure, suddenly looked different in this new light. Celeste, I'm proud of you, she said simply. I always have been. I just never knew how to say it. My father was still silent, his face buried in his hands. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red with tears. Aurora, he said, his voice broken. I don't know how to take back what I said. I don't know how to undo 28 years of being wrong about everything. Dad, no, let me finish. I've been so focused on building a legacy, on maintaining an image, that I forgot what really matters. I forgot that having a daughter who serves others, who saves lives, who embodies honor and courage, That's not an embarrassment. That's the greatest achievement any father could ask for. He stood up slowly, like an old man carrying the weight of years. I called you a disgrace, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But the truth is, I'm the disgrace. I'm the one who failed. I failed to see who you really are. I failed to support you when you needed it most. I failed to be the father you deserved. The pain in his voice was raw, genuine. For the first time in my life, I saw my father not as the successful businessman who had all the answers, but as a man who had just realized he'd been wrong about everything that mattered. I don't expect forgiveness, he continued. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that when I tell people about my daughters from now on, I'll tell them about Celeste's business success, and then I'll tell them about Aurora, the war hero, the woman who saves lives, the daughter who became everything I never had the courage to be. Admiral Harrison and his wife stopped by our table as they were leaving. She was a small woman with kind eyes and silver hair, wearing a simple blue dress that spoke of understated elegance. Lieutenant Commander, she said warmly, James has told me so much about you, about what you did that night. Mrs. Harrison, I said, standing again. It was my job. Any officer would have— No, Admiral Harrison interrupted gently. Any officer would have followed protocol. You followed your conscience. There's a difference. His wife reached into her purse and pulled out a small card with elegant script handwriting. Our son is getting married next month, she said. We'd be honored if you could attend, as our special guest. I took the card with trembling hands. After years of feeling like an outsider in my own family, these strangers were inviting me into theirs. We'll understand if you can't make it, Admiral Harrison added. But we wanted you to know that you'll always be part of our family. The men you saved that night, they all have families too. Wives, children, parents who still have their loved ones because of you. Mrs. Harrison squeezed my hand gently. We have grandchildren now because of what you did, she whispered. Little ones who will grow up knowing their grandfather because a brave woman chose to break the rules to save his life. After they left, my family and I sat in heavy silence. The weight of the evening hung over us like fog, but it was a different kind of weight now. Not the crushing weight of disappointment and shame, but the heavy silence of people processing a fundamental shift in their understanding of the world. I'm sorry, my father said finally. His voice was broken, hollow. Aurora, I'm so incredibly sorry. Dad, no, let me say this. He looked up at me, and I saw tears in his eyes for the first time since I was a child. I've been wrong about everything. About you. About what matters. About what success really means. He stood up and walked around the table, stopping in front of my chair. I've spent so many years worried about what other people would think, about the family image, about maintaining appearances, about building a business legacy. I forgot the most important thing, being proud of my daughter for who she really is. I am proud of you, he continued, his voice shaking. Not because an admiral told me to be, because you're brave and honorable and selfless in ways I never taught you to be. You became a hero despite having me as a father. Not because of it. The words I'd been waiting my entire life to hear finally came, but they hurt more than any insult ever had. I don't need you to be proud of me now, I said quietly. I needed you to believe in me when it was hard, when I was struggling at the Naval Academy, when I chose service over profit and honor over image, when I was deployed overseas and needed to hear that my family supported my choice. I know, he whispered, and I failed you. I failed as a father, and I failed as a man. But if you'll let me, I want to try to do better. I want to learn who my daughter really is. I want to understand what you do, what you've accomplished, what you've sacrificed. My mother reached across the table and took my hand. We both do, she said softly. Aurora, I've been complicit in this. I let your father's disappointment become my own. I should have fought for you. I should have supported your dreams instead of worrying about what the country club ladies would think. She was crying again, but her grip on my hand was firm. Will you forgive us? She asked. Will you give us another chance to be the parents you deserved? Looking at my family, really looking at them for the first time in years, I saw something I'd never seen before. Genuine remorse, real understanding, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of acceptance. I can try, I said finally, but things have to change, really change. I won't be someone else to make you comfortable. I won't pretend my career doesn't matter to protect your image. "We don't want you to," Celeste said firmly. "We want you to be exactly who you are. The woman who saves lives. The woman who serves her country. Our hero." 1 month later, I stood on the stage at the Navy Memorial in Washington, D.C., receiving the Navy and Marine Corps Medal for heroism. My entire family was in the front row. My father had tears streaming down his face as the Secretary of the Navy placed the medal around my neck. But the moment that meant the most came afterward, at the reception. A young woman approached me. She couldn't have been more than 25, with a baby in her arms and a toddler holding her hand. She had that look of military wives everywhere, strong, resilient, but touched by the constant fear that comes with loving someone who risks their life for their country. "Lieutenant Commander Reeves?" she said hesitantly. "I'm Katie Morrison. My husband was one of the pilots you saved that night." My breath caught in my throat. "He wanted to be here," she continued, "but he's deployed to the Pacific. But he asked me to give you this." She handed me a letter, written in careful handwriting on official Navy stationery. "Lieutenant Commander Reeves, I don't have fancy words or military decorations to offer you. I'm just a pilot who gets to come home to his family because of your courage. When my instruments failed that night, when I couldn't see the runway through the storm, your voice was the only thing between me and the bottom of the Atlantic. You didn't just save my life. You saved my children's father. You saved my wife's husband. You saved my parents' son. I think about that night every time I kiss my kids goodnight, every time I hold my wife, every time I see another sunrise. All of those moments exist because you chose to break the rules for us. That's not disgrace, ma'am. That's grace itself. Katie tells me your father called you a failure. With all due respect, sir, he's wrong. You're not a failure. You're the reason 6 families are still whole. You're the reason 6 children still have their fathers. You're the reason 6 wives didn't become widows that night. I've flown combat missions over 3 different theaters. I've been decorated for valor and skill. But the bravest thing I've ever witnessed was you, sitting in that control tower, refusing to give up on us when everyone else had written us off. Thank you for bringing us home. Thank you for risking everything. Thank you for being the kind of person who chooses others over self. With eternal gratitude and deepest respect, Lieutenant Ryan Morrison." I was crying before I finished reading. Katie was crying too. "He's not the only one," she said softly. "All 6 families wanted to be here today. We wanted you to know that you're not just a hero to the Navy. You're a hero to us, to our children who still have their fathers because of you." She gestured to a group standing nearby, 5 other women with children, all watching me with tear-filled eyes. "We call ourselves the Norfolk Six," Katie continued. "Our husband's squadron, our children's fathers, your pilots." One by one they approached. Each family had a story, a letter, a picture. Each one represented a life saved, a family kept whole, a future preserved because of one night when I chose to break the rules. Looking out at the reception, I saw my family watching me with new eyes. My father was talking animatedly with Admiral Harrison, hanging on every word about my career and the details of that night. My mother was showing pictures of me in uniform to Mrs. Harrison, her voice full of pride as she described my service. Celeste was deep in conversation with one of the pilot families, learning about the night that changed everything. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the family disappointment. I was their hero. But more than that, I was myself. Completely, unapologetically myself. The woman who served her country with honor, who saved lives, who chose duty over comfort and courage over safety. My father approached as the evening was winding down. "Aurora," he said quietly, "I've been talking to Admiral Harrison about your career, your accomplishments, your service record." I braced myself, not sure what was coming. "I want to do something," he continued. "Reeves Industries has never had a charitable foundation. I want to create one. The Aurora Reeves Foundation for Military Families. I want to use our resources to support the families of service members, to help them while their loved ones are deployed." I stared at him in shock. "I can't undo the past," he said, "but I can try to honor who you are moving forward. I can try to be worthy of having a daughter like you." 6 months later, I received orders for a new assignment, Commanding Officer of Flight Operations at Naval Air Station Oceana. It was a promotion I'd dreamed of for years, a chance to lead, to shape the next generation of naval aviators. My family threw a celebration dinner at the same restaurant where it all began. This time, My father stood up during dessert and tapped his wine glass for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the entire restaurant, "I'd like you to meet my daughter, Lieutenant Commander Aurora Reeves. She's a war hero, a lifesaver, and the finest officer in the United States Navy." The applause was thunderous, but what mattered most was the look in my father's eyes. Pure, unqualified pride. The real revelation that night wasn't that I was a hero. It was that I had always been enough, exactly as I was. The problem was never my choices or my path. It was the lens through which my family viewed them. Success isn't measured in dollars or deals or society's approval. It's measured in lives touched, in courage shown when no one is watching, in the willingness to sacrifice everything for something bigger than yourself. My father learned that lesson at dinner that night, when a stranger had to tell him who his daughter really was. But I learned something too, that sometimes the people who should know us best are the ones who see us least clearly. Admiral Harrison was right about one thing. I don't follow the book when lives are at stake. I follow my conscience. And my conscience tells me that every day I spend serving others is a day well lived, regardless of who understands it. I'm Lieutenant Commander Aurora Reeves. I save lives, coordinate rescues, and guide pilots home through storms. I've been called a disgrace by my father, and a hero by an admiral. But most importantly, I know who I am. And that knowledge, that's worth more than all the approval in the world. The Norfolk 6 still sends me letters. Their children draw me pictures of airplanes and thank you cards in crayon. They remind me daily that service isn't about recognition or praise. It's about the moments when you choose to put others first, even when no one will ever know. My family knows now. They understand. They support me. But even if they didn't, I would still be who I am. I would still serve. I would still choose others over self, because that's what heroes do. Not because they're called heroes, but because they can't imagine being anything else. And in the end, that's the final revelation. The most important recognition comes not from others, but from yourself. The moment you realize you're exactly who you're supposed to be, doing exactly what you're supposed to do, everything else is just noise. Telling you this story, sharing the moment when everything changed for me. It reminds me why these revelations matter so much. Maybe you're listening to this because you've been underestimated too. Maybe someone in your life has called you a failure, a disappointment. Maybe you're fighting to prove your worth to people who should already see it. If that's you, then you understand why I'm asking for something small, something free, something that costs you nothing but means everything to me. Most people listen to these stories and walk away. They feel the emotion, they connect with the struggle, but they forget to hit that subscribe button. And here's the truth. That little red button, it's the only help I need from you. It's free. It takes 2 seconds, but it tells me that my story mattered, that sharing the hardest moment of my life, it reached someone. When my father called me a disgrace in front of strangers, I felt invisible, worthless, like my voice didn't matter. Don't let my voice disappear again. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that you're enough exactly as you are, just hit subscribe, because there are more stories like mine, more moments when the underestimated become the heroes, more final revelations that change everything, and maybe, just maybe, your story will be next. Subscribe, because your support is the only recognition I need.